The Greco-Persian Wars were a long series of conflicts fought between the Persian Empire and several Greek city-states during the early 5th century BCE. These wars shaped the future of Western civilization, influenced political ideas like democracy, and helped define Greek cultural identity. Although the wars involved many battles and leaders, their story can be understood by looking at how they began, what happened during the major battles, and why they mattered in the long run. The wars did not take place all at once. Instead, they unfolded in waves, driven by politics, rebellion, misunderstandings, and the ambitions of powerful rulers. To understand the causes of the Greco-Persian Wars, it is important to look at the world in which they occurred. The Persian Empire, founded by Cyrus the Great and expanded by his successors, was the largest empire the world had ever seen at that time. It stretched from modern-day Turkey and the Middle East to parts of India and Egypt. The empire brought together many cultures, languages, and religions under a system that demanded loyalty and taxes from the people it controlled. The Greeks, in contrast, lived in small, independent city-states called Palaeus. The most famous of these were Athens and Sparta, but there were hundreds more scattered around the Greek mainland, the Aegean Islands, and the western coast of Asia Minor, modern-day Turkey. Each city-state had its own government, culture, traditions, and military style. Some were democracies like Athens. Others were oligarchies, ruled by a small group, like Sparta or Corinth. The Greeks did not have a unified empire. They often argued or even fought among themselves. But they shared a common language, religious beliefs, and cultural identity. On the western coast of Asia Minor, many Greek cities had fallen under Persian control. These cities were known as the Ionian Greeks. They paid taxes to Persia and had Persian-appointed rulers. This situation became the spark that would eventually ignite the Greco-Persian Wars. The first major event leading to the war was the Ionian Revolt. Around 499 BCE, the Greek city of Miletus and several others in Ionia rebelled against Persian rule. The reasons for the revolt were complex. Local leaders resented Persian control. Heavy taxes created anger, and many Ionian Greeks wished to regain independence. The leader of the revolt, Aristagoras of Miletus, asked for help from mainland Greek city-states. Many refused, but Athens and Eretria, two small but rising powers, agreed to support the Ionian rebels. They sent ships and soldiers to Asia Minor. This involvement would later have huge consequences. The combined Greek forces even succeeded in burning the Persian city of Sardis, which shocked and angered the Persian king, Darius I. Although the revolt was eventually crushed by the Persians in 494 BCE, Darius did not forget what the Athenians and Eretrians had done. He wanted revenge, and he also wanted to expand his empire westward. The Ionian Revolt ended in Persian victory, but it marked the beginning of a much larger conflict. Darius was determined to punish Athens and its allies, and this decision would lead directly to the first Persian invasion of Greece. Darius began planning a campaign to bring Greece under Persian control. His first attempt in 492 BCE focused on conquering northern Greece, but a storm destroyed much of his fleet, forcing him to retreat. Darius remained determined, however, and launched a second attempt in 490 BCE. This time, the Persian forces sailed across the Aegean Sea, conquering smaller islands as they went. They attacked the city of Eretria, burned it, and enslaved its population. Their next target was Athens. The Persian army landed on the plain of Marathon, about 40 kilometers from Athens. The Athenians, led by Miltiades, faced a much larger Persian force. They had only about 10,000 soldiers, mostly heavily armored hoplites. The Persians had perhaps double or triple that number, though exact estimates vary. Despite the odds, the Athenians attacked. They used a bold strategy. They strengthened their battle line on the wings and weakened the center. When the Persians pushed back the center, the stronger Athenian wings closed in from the sides and surrounded them. The result was a stunning Greek victory. Thousands of Persians were killed, and the rest fled back to their ships. Athens had defended itself, and the first Persian invasion ended in failure. The legend of a messenger running from Marathon to Athens to announce victory about 26 miles inspired the modern marathon race. Whether or not the story is exactly true, it reflects how important the battle was to Greek identity. Although the Greeks had won at Marathon, they knew Persia would return. Darius died before he could launch another invasion, but his son Xerxes I inherited his father's ambition. Planning for a massive invasion began. Meanwhile, in Athens, a powerful statesman named Themistocles convinced the people to build a large navy. He argued that Athens could not rely on land forces alone and that a strong fleet would be essential against Persia. His advice turned out to be crucial. Athens used newly discovered silver mines to fund the construction of hundreds of warships known as triremes fast, maneuverable ships with rams on their bows. Other Greek city-states also prepared for war, though not all agreed on what to do. Some wanted to submit to Persia. Others, such as Sparta, were ready to fight but were skeptical of Athens. Despite internal disagreements, many Greek states eventually formed a loose alliance known as the Hellenic League, with Sparta taking leadership on land and Athens leading at sea. Xerxes gathered one of the largest armies ever assembled in the ancient world. Ancient sources claim he brought millions of soldiers, but modern historians believe the real number was likely between 100,000 and 300,000. His fleet may have included around 1,000 ships. It was still an enormous force by ancient standards. In 480 BCE, Xerxes' army crossed from Asia into Europe using a massive pontoon bridge over the Hellespont. The sight of such a huge invasion force terrified many Greeks. The Greeks attempted to block the Persian advance at several key points, leading to some of the most famous battles in ancient history. One of the most legendary moments of the war was the Battle of Thermopylae. The Greek land army, led by King Leonidas of Sparta, attempted to stop the Persians in a narrow mountain pass called Thermopylae, the Hot Gates. The narrow path meant that the Persians could not use their larger numbers effectively. Leonidas brought only 300 Spartan soldiers, but they were joined by a few thousand other Greek fighters. The Spartans were famous for their discipline, training, and bravery. For 2 days, they held off repeated Persian attacks. Eventually, a Greek trader named Ephialtes showed the Persians a hidden path around the mountains. This allowed them to surround the Greeks. Realizing they could not win, Leonidas sent most of the Greek troops away and stayed behind with his 300 Spartans and a small number of allies. They fought to the death. Although the Greeks lost the battle, the defense at Thermopylae became a symbol of courage, sacrifice, and resistance against overwhelming odds. At the same time as Thermopylae, the Greek navy fought the Persian fleet in the waters near Artemisium. The battles were indecisive, and when the Spartans fell at Thermopylae, the Greek navy withdrew. After Thermopylae, the Persian army marched south. Many Athenians already knew they could not defend their city on land, so they evacuated. When the Persians arrived, they burned Athens, including the Acropolis. Even though the city was destroyed, the Athenians still had their navy and their will to fight. Themistocles now made a clever plan. He sent a message, possibly false or misleading, to Xerxes, claiming that the Greeks were planning to flee. Xerxes believed him and ordered his fleet into the narrow straits near the island of Salamis. This was exactly where the Greeks wanted to fight. In tight waters, the larger Persian fleet could not maneuver properly. The smaller Greek fleet, especially the Athenian triremes, used their speed and ramming tactics to great effect. The Persian fleet suffered a massive defeat. Salamis was one of the most important naval battles in history because it stopped the Persian advance and protected the Greek cities from occupation. Xerxes, worried about unrest back home and fearing his supply lines might be cut, returned to Persia with part of his army. He left a general named Mardonius in charge of continuing the campaign. The next year, the Greeks gathered a large army and confronted the remaining Persian forces at the Battle of Plataea. Led by the Spartan general Pausanias, the Greeks won a decisive victory. At roughly the same time, the Greek navy defeated the Persian fleet at Mycale on the coast of Asia Minor. These two victories effectively ended the Second Persian invasion. The Persians withdrew from Greece entirely. Although the main fighting ended in 479 BCE, the conflict between Greece and Persia was not completely over. Athens took a leading role in helping the Ionian Greek cities remain free from Persian control. To support this effort, Athens organized a new alliance called the Delian League. Many Greek islands and cities joined. They contributed ships or money in exchange for protection. Over time, Athens became extremely powerful. The Delian League turned into something like an Athenian empire. This eventually caused tensions with Sparta and its allies, leading to the Peloponnesian War, a long and destructive conflict among the Greeks themselves. Still, the Greco-Persian Wars had lasting effects. Greek independence was preserved. Ideas like democracy, philosophy, and drama continued to develop in Athens, influencing the Western world for centuries. The wars also helped create a shared sense of Greek identity, even though the city-states often disagreed. The Greco-Persian Wars have become legendary not just because of the battles, but because of what they represented. The Greeks believed they were defending their freedom against a massive empire. Many Greek writers, especially Herodotus, portrayed the conflict as a struggle between liberty and tyranny. Modern historians recognize that the situation was more complex, but the idea has remained powerful. The wars also demonstrated the importance of strategy, unity, and leadership. Figures like Themistocles, Leonidas, and Xerxes became symbols of courage, innovation, and ambition. The battles Marathon, Thermopylae, Salamis, and Plataea are still studied today for their military lessons. One of the most lasting effects of the wars was the rise of Athens as a major power. With its strong navy and growing wealth, Athens entered a golden age of art, architecture, philosophy, and science. Without the Greek victories against Persia, this cultural flowering might never have occurred. The Greco-Persian Wars were a defining moment in ancient history. They began with a revolt in Ionia and expanded into a huge struggle between the world's largest empire and a collection of small, independent Greek city-states. Through bravery, strategy, and cooperation, the Greeks managed to resist and eventually defeat the Persian forces. The battles of Marathon, Thermopylae, Salamis, and Plataea remain some of the most famous in world history. The wars protected Greek independence and helped shape the development of Western civilization. Democracy in Athens, advances in philosophy and science, and the growth of Greek culture all grew from the freedom preserved during this conflict. Though the Greeks often fought among themselves later, their united resistance against Persia became a lasting story of courage, sacrifice, and the determination of a people to defend their way of life.